Hello and welcome to TVB News. The court today approved a request from the Department of Justice for manslaughter charges against two United Christian Hospital doctors to be dropped. The two doctors allegedly made mistakes when they gave a patient prescriptions as they failed to consider an underlying condition. That triggered kidney failure and the patient eventually died. Sharon Tang has details.
At the Eastern Magistrates Courts today, prosecutors announced the court had approved its application to drop the manslaughter charges against the two doctors. The two doctors, Lam Chi Kwan and Chan Siu Kim, walked free from court. The Department of Justice said the decision was made after reviewing evidence and current laws. Patient Tang Kwai Si, who had kidney issues, sought medical help at United Christian Hospital in 2017. Lam and Chan both prescribed high-dosage steroids, but none of them noticed she was a hepatitis B carrier and failed to give her an antiviral drug to counteract the side effects of steroids. That resulted in Tang's liver failure. She died in August the same year despite undergoing 2 liver transplants. In September 2021, the Medical Council found the two doctors guilty of professional misconduct. Their licenses were revoked, but the sentences were suspended. In January this year, 6 years after the patient's death, the police arrested the doctors on suspicion of unlawfully killing Tang Kwai Si in Hong Kong. The case was mentioned in court several times. Medical sector lawmaker David Lam, who attended the court hearings, supports the withdrawal of the charges. He said normally doctors only have a few minutes to diagnose a patient, and it's impossible for them to remember the patient's medical history, which could be hundreds of pages. A death inquest into Tang's death, originally scheduled for earlier this year, was postponed due to the court hearings.
We expect the death inquest will be reopened, restored, so that we will understand more of what had happened behind the death of this patient.
The hospital authority said the doctors were earlier taken off clinical duties after they were charged earlier this year. Sources say United Christian Hospital told employees through an internal email today that it's a relief now that the charges had been dropped. It added the pair will resume their duties and that it will stand with the two when the death inquest begins. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Super Typhoon Salah is forecast to come within 800 kilometers of Hong Kong over the next 1 or 2 days. The Hong Kong Observatory will consider issuing the tropical cyclone warning signal. According to the latest forecast track, Salah will be moving close to Hong Kong, but its path will be affected by another tropical cyclone. Haikui. Jackie Lin reports.
We had a mix of sun and clouds at noon around Victoria Harbour, breezes around the pier and North Point, but the weather might worsen in the latter part of this week. At 5 p.m, Super Typhoon Salah is hovering east of the Luzon Strait. The storm system is expected to come within 800 kilometers of Hong Kong in the next few days. The observatory will consider issuing the tropical cyclone warning signal in the next couple of days. But uncertainty remains owing to the possible influence of severe tropical cyclone Haikui, which is around 1,000 kilometers to the east of Salah. Salah, having moved closer to Hong Kong than earlier forecast, could barrel westwards along the coast of Guangdong. The observatory's scientific officer Lam Hock Yin said, as Haikui moves faster than Salah, and when the distance between them shortens, Haikui could affect Salah's subsequent path. The observatory also said under the influence of the outer subsiding air of Salah, the city will face extremely hot weather with some sunshine over the next 2 days. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
National Security Police arrested 2 men in Tai Po today. The two are suspected of conspiring with the now disbanded 612 Humanitarian Relief Fund to receive donations from overseas organizations. Allegedly, the money may have been used to support fugitives or groups that called for sanctions against Hong Kong. Police searched the residence of one of the suspects in the afternoon. Some computers and a cage were taken away. The two arrested men are aged 33 and 59. They are suspected of conspiring to collude with a foreign country or with external elements to endanger national security, as well as conspiring to incite others to commit riot. In early August, police arrested 10 other people connected to the 612 Humanitarian Relief Fund. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo met with Vice Premier He Feng in Beijing this afternoon as she continued her 4-day trip to China. On Monday, Raimondo held talks with Commerce Minister Wang Wentao. Following the dialogue, Beijing and Washington agreed to set up new formal working groups on commercial issues and information exchange for export control enforcement. Daniel Rao tells us more.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo met with Vice Premier He Feng on Tuesday afternoon in Beijing. The two shook hands and posed for photos at the Great Hall of the People. They held a bilateral meeting attended by senior officials from both sides. He mentioned the meeting between President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Joe Biden in Bali last year. The Vice Premier expressed hope the U.S. could work with China to adopt rational and practical practices and put the leader's recommendations into practice. Raimondo said the U.S.-China relationship is one of the most globally consequential, and managing that relationship is critical to both countries and the world. Prior to her meeting with her, Raimondo and Tourism Minister Hu Heping agreed to hold the 14th China-U.S. Tourism Leadership Summit in China in the first half of 2024. The step aimed to further revive and develop tourism cooperation between the two nations, the U.S. Commerce Department said in a statement. And on Monday, Raimondo held talks with Commerce Minister Wang Wentao. The Chinese Commerce Minister expressed serious concerns about various U.S. practices. Among them were Section 301 tariffs on Chinese exports, semiconductor policies, and sanctions targeting Chinese companies. Raimondo said Washington is not compromising or negotiating on matters of national security. Still, Washington and Beijing agreed to a new formal working group on commercial issues, as well as the informational exchange on export control enforcement. A senior official said it is an effort for both sides to answer questions about how export controls work. The new Commercial Issues Working Group aims to bring together US and Chinese government officials and private sector representatives to seek solutions on trade and investment issues and to advance US commercial interests in China. Dunnerell, TVB News.
In the United States, a suspect was arrested after a faculty member of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill was killed in a campus shooting. A lockdown on campus was enforced Monday until police arrested the suspect 3 hours later. American media reported the suspect is a Chinese postgraduate student studying abroad. Tracy Furness has more.
Students and faculty barricaded themselves in dorm rooms, offices and classrooms Monday after a shooting that left one faculty member dead.
This afternoon, shortly after 1 p.m., UNC police were notified of shots being fired in Cotto Laboratories on our campus. The suspect was eventually apprehended and is now in custody. I'm grieved to report that one of our faculty members was killed in this shooting. This loss is devastating, and the shooting damages the trust and safety that we so often take for granted in our campus community.
U.S. media reported the suspect arrested is Tyler Chi, a postgraduate student at the university. A former classmate of the suspect said he would never have guessed he would have been capable of this kind of thing. He was always very quiet. During the standoff, there was a heavy police presence, including armed police around the campus.
We were in genome sciences over there, and we were just in the middle of our astronomy class, and the projector on the screen just came up with like the Alert Carolina message that was like, there's an armed and dangerous man on campus or something like that. And we just went through the lecture like normal for a little bit, and then we kind of realized it was a pretty serious situation.
Police are searching for both the weapon and the motive for the shooting. The university has a student population of about 32,000, with 4,100 faculty and 9,000 staff members. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Also in the U.S., the judge overseeing former President Donald Trump's federal election interference case has set a trial date. Now, another trial for the Republican frontrunner is set to collide with the 2024 presidential primaries. NBC has more.
Tonight, request denied. That's the ruling from a federal judge to former President Trump, seeking to delay the start of his federal election interference trial until after the 2024 election. Instead, Judge Tanya Chutkan has set a start date of March 4th. Prosecutors had requested a January start date, but Trump attorneys had pushed for a 2026 start, saying they needed time to prepare. But Judge Chutkan said Mr. Trump, like any defendant, will have to make the trial date work regardless of his schedule. Today, Mr. Trump blasted it as an attempt to undermine his presidential campaign, calling it election interference. It's yet another collision between the Republican frontrunner's legal calendar and the height of campaign season. That March 4th start date, just one day before Super Tuesday. 3 weeks later, the start of Mr. Trump's trial in Manhattan, where a DA is accusing him of concealing hush money payments to a porn star. He's pleaded not guilty. Then on May 20th, the special counsel's case on classified documents. Mr. Trump has also pleaded not guilty. Not yet on the calendar, the election interference case in Fulton County, Georgia, where today his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, testified about this call from then President Trump to Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Meadows is pushing to move his case to federal court, which would mean jurors from outside Atlanta, not just heavily Democratic Fulton County. All of it is spilling from the courtroom to the campaign trail, where the Trump campaign says it's raised more than $7 million since his surrender last Thursday, including selling campaign merchandise featuring Mr. Trump's mugshot. And tonight, Mr. Trump's Georgia arraignment has been set for September 6th. He could appear in person or virtually or waive his appearance altogether.
U.S. President Joe Biden is to visit Vietnam next month, the White House said, in the hope of boosting economic, technological, and people-to-people ties between the two countries. Biden will travel to Hanoi on September 10th to meet the Secretary General of the Communist Party of Vietnam, Nguyen Phu Trong, after attending the annual Group of 20 Leaders Summit in India. Biden had earlier said that Vietnam wanted to change its relationship with the U.S. and become a major partner. The U.S. president is keen to improve relations with Southeast Asian nations amid American concern about China's growing influence in the region. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen had already visited Vietnam earlier this year. It has been 50 years since the U.S. withdrew its troops from Vietnam, with diplomatic relations restored in 1995. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke on the phone, with the two leaders discussing Moscow's participation at next month's Group of 20 summit in New Delhi. Putin told Modi that Russia will be represented by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov at the summit, according to a statement from the Indian government. The International Criminal Court has an arrest warrant out for Putin, accusing him of war crimes. At last week's BRICS summit in South Africa, Putin attended via video link. South Africa is a signatory to the ICC, while India is not. Tomorrow is the Hungry Ghost Festival, but there are concerns that offerings left over are attracting wild boars. Some citizens burned paper offerings, such as in this open area in Sha Tin. Yet some food offerings also attracted wild boars. This woman said she saw 10 to 20 boars last night, and they're not afraid of people at all. An area committee says there have been more complaints about wild boars lately. It's urged residents to clean up their offerings after the rites. An organizer of the Yulan Ghost Festival says there is no need for devotees to leave fruit or food offerings on the streets. That is the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.